Hello and welcome to Miss Adair's reading class today. We are going to be reading Hatchet by Gary PAULSEN. He actually is one of my favorite authors. He tends to write a lot of books where the main characters are faced with, adventure and survival. And I just think those books are really fun to read. They're good page turners, and I just really like reading adventure type of books. So that is why I usually start out the school year with Hatchet. And so we'll learn a little bit about who Gary PAULSEN is, where this story can kind of take place in history, and we'll do a little bit of group discussion too. If you're a remote learner, while you're doing the group discussion, go ahead and pause the video after I ask the question. And if you've got like your mom or anybody who's hanging around, sibling at home, maybe you could, talk about it and ask that question and have a little discussion that way too. So let's go ahead and get started. In class today, we talked about like the title of Hatchet and what we thought that might mean the book is about. Based on that, what's it going to be about? What is a hatchet? Some students, weren't quite sure, but, a hatchet is a smaller, size axe, usually used to, take branches off and that kind of thing. So, but it's a very useful tool anyways. So, think about it just for a minute, and I'll get back to you. All right, and then we have the front cover of the book, and if you have it there with you, go ahead and look at it. You can see a plane up at the top flying over, a northern type forest similar to the ones that we have out here in Alaska. And there's also a lake that's down near the bottom. I'll kind of put it here. So we've got our airplane up at the top, our nice northern Alaska Canadian type forest, and a lake that looks like, that could be anywhere here around the Kenai, Soldotna, and Nikiski area. So it should be a wilderness that we as students are very familiar with. So I think that makes us have a little bit more connection to the story. All right. So if you have anybody who's with you who you could have these discussions with, that's great. If not, just something to think about, or you could write your answers in your reading notebook. Okay? But if you crashed a plane in the wilderness and were only allowed to have 3 items, what would you choose and why? And these are always really fun to discuss and to argue about. What's most important to you to have to make your survival better. So if you need, go ahead and pause the video while you write those down and come back when you're ready. Your next question is, what do you think the most difficult part of being stuck alone in the wilderness would be? Who or what would you miss most, and why? I would start to say my own opinion, but I don't want to tarnish what you would think of. So when you're ready, you can either discuss this with people near you or write this in your reading notebook and pause me. All right, and your next question. Do you think that all secrets should be kept? What kind of secrets are worth telling and which ones are worth keeping? Secrets can be tricky sometimes. There's a lot of, there's a fine line between, maybe a secret that is harmless and a secret that can pack some damage, I guess. So think about that for a minute and come back when you're ready. All right, so we're going to transition here into learning about Gary PAULSEN. Like I said, he's one of my favorite authors. I've read a ton of his books, and he's pretty great. He was born in 1939 in Minneapolis, and he's just like I said, one of the most popular writers for young people, young readers, middle school age, high school age. I love him as an adult. And here is just a quick image of him. Let's see if that'll load up for you. All right, so that loaded up, and now we have a variety of pictures of Gary Paulsen. You see, he looks like he could fit in very well here in Kenai area. He loves being in the outdoors. He's an avid sportsman, and just also loves adventure and adventure-type stories. We'll come back and learn a little bit more about Gary Paulsen. So when he was in high school and and younger, he wasn't ever a strong reader, and he really didn't enjoy it. He lacked his motivation, but he finally did get his library card. His local librarian helped him get that, and through that librarian, he became an avid reader. And then at the age of 14. He actually ran away from home and worked for a circus. Gary Paulsen has had tons of different jobs, and he loves sharing and writing his stories from personal experience. In his life, he was a farmhand, an engineer, he worked construction, he was a ranch hand and helped, with horses and that kind of thing, a truck driver, and even up here he worked with an Alaskan dog sled team, learning how to care for dog teams. He has one book called Dog Song about his time as a dog sledder, not necessarily from his point of view, but using his own experiences to help tell his story. One summer he spent as a magazine proofreader. That's where you're editing magazine articles. But he left the job, rented a cabin in Minnesota just so he could start writing. He was tired of editing and fixing other people's writing. He wanted to be creative and tell his own stories. And sometimes he would just lock himself in his cabin and just write and write and write for 18 to 20 hours a day. And if anybody's ever practiced something for 18 to 20 hours a day, you're going to get pretty good at it if you put that much time and energy at doing it and making it better. So that's definitely something I can commend Gary Paulsen for. He worked his tail off to become a writer. And even still, working that hard to become a writer isn't always going to guarantee that you're going to be really good and famous and sell your stories across the country. It just puts you in a better position. So Gary Paulsen's written more than 175 books, 200 articles, and lots of short stories. Like I had mentioned Dog Song earlier. That's one of his Newbery Award winners. Hatchet, which is the book we're going to read, and The Winter Room have all won that Newbery Honor Award. We'll keep going. So here's a little quiz. And if you'd like, you can just watch. All right, so there's going to be a Were You Listening quiz. So you'll go to your Google Classroom and open up the Were You Listening quiz, and there'll be 4 or 5 questions on there for you to answer. All right, I'm going to pause this so I can skip this next slide, and I'll finish up with our lesson here in just a second. All right, so hopefully you finished your Were You Listening quiz. And you're back ready to go and learn a little bit about the context of Hatchet. Where does it take place? And, what was the world like when Hatchet was published? So Hatchet was published in 1987, and it's the first novel in that series of novels. There's 5 different ones. I haven't read all the way through them. I've actually only read through to Brian's Winter. So maybe this year I'll make it on my to-do list to finish up the series and read Brian's Return and also Brian's Hunt. I was going to keep talking, but I don't want to do any spoilers on what Hatchet's going to be about, so I'll pause myself and not do that. All right. At the beginning of the story, Brian is flying from Hampton, New York to the oil fields in northern Canada. That's 1,327 miles of range that would probably take him into the northern forest of Ontario at the time of the crash. So you can see down here, that's where the New York area is, and the plane took off heading in this direction. Okay, and something happens along the way. It does tell us here that it's a crash, so I am giving you a bit more of a spoiler than I had wanted to, but you know, sometimes we got to do that. I had also mentioned that Gary Paulsen likes to tell lots of coming-of-age stories. There's that transformation from Brian, a young child, to Brian the man. And that usually has to do with adventure and, you know, survival and figuring out how to do things on your own because you're the only person who can take care of yourself. You're the only one who can solve your problems. How are you going to do that as an adult? And that's what we learn about with Brian and in a lot of Gary Paulsen's books. Okay, so that's the end of our lesson today. Thanks for showing up and watching our video. Tomorrow we will be getting ready and reading the first few chapters of Hatchet. And I really love this book, guys, so I look forward to sharing it with you and hearing lots of really awesome discussion. So thanks, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.